last night I got a call from the PA of Mr. Ramaphosa while I was having supper in a restaurant, asking me if I can speak to Mr. Ramaphosa. I was asked if I can arrange a quick talk between Ramaphosa and Elon last night. So I said, all right, so I did. And then they spoke a few minutes later, and it's on my phone. I can only imagine that Elon would have said, look, we want to help you, but you have to quit this war on white people in South Africa. I imagine Elon would say, get rid of these rules, the laws or whatever, that discriminate against anybody, not just white people. Just get with it, you know. I have gone out of my way for years to lift up black people. No black person has ever tried to lift me up. So how much more equality do you want?
In prison, being white, you are treated differently because you are a resource. So people realize you will more than likely have family that will come to visit you. You more than likely will then have money.
If you say you're a foreigner and you're white, no one gives a shit.
Yeah? No one.
No one gives a shit.
Those are the dynamics of this country, boy.
Yeah. So it's like I can say I'm from Zimbabwe, but I know people that have lied about where they're from, right? To this day, they've lived in South Africa for 20, 30 years, and they will never tell people where they come from. They speak the South African languages. They'll never tell people where they come from. Sure. But as a white guy, I can say I'm from Zimbabwe and no one does anything.
Yeah.
We are the Boers. We are a very proud nation. We are the white tribe of Africa. And we are here to show the people today. We're going to make our stand in this country. There's certain parts of this country that is our parts.
You grew up in South Africa.
Yeah.
You were in the army there?
No, I left at 17 in order to avoid conscription into the South African
so you
army.
left so that you didn't have to do the army.
You know, spending 2 years suppressing black people didn't seem to be a great use of time.
I think that's probably the worst use of any human being's time.
Right.
So good for you.
Right.
Right on. Elon Musk.
Mashani politically incorrect. South African white people are one of the most, you know, there's this, I think most of you know what is a Karen. So a Karen is mostly a white person, a female who would from time to time expect too much from their white privileges and want to dominate other races and using their whiteness. So it's called being a Karen. I don't even know the etymology of that Karen issue, but this is what a Karen is. So Karens are mostly observed in the US and stuff, but just go to online media and just type Karen, you'll see who are Karens. They've been saying a lot on social media that white South Africans are Karens. They are one of the most spoiled people in the world. They do not have accountability and stuff. And people, they've used this problem with, because not the first time they're doing it, this problem of Afriforum and Democratic Alliance running to Elon Musk and Donald Trump to lie about things that they cannot even prove. And when Donald Trump, who's an open racist, and Elon Musk, who is an unpatriotic South African, when they are told those people are lying to you, let them show you proof. No, they don't. But they spew bile in this campaign in South Africa. And this is where this thing comes from. So I just want us to talk. Let's talk, South Africans. What is it? Because I've said it a lot about this matter of Elon Musk and Donald Trump as well. I'm saying they're doing it deliberately because they know there's no consequence they are going to suffer. That's just me. If there were consequences for us making them suffer for something, they wouldn't say it. But they do it because what are we going to do about it? There's nothing we're going to do. There's this African boxer, Drias or someone, he fights. So that boy loves to project himself as an African, of which of course I don't believe he is. And now I think he's got an upcoming fight. He's trendy because he wore a shirt that shows love for Donald Trump and who's the other guy? Elon Musk. And South Africans are at war. But here are the interesting South Africans, white South Africans. Helen Keller and Bianca. One of the far most interesting South Africans. Let me make it short. Just listen and enjoy. Thank you. Mashiach, politically incorrect. Tell me what you feel about it. It's always very interesting when it's white people calling out other white people instead of us doing it. Thank you.
Afriforum has finally gotten their way, or have they? They've managed to convince Donald Trump that there's a white genocide happening in South Africa, land grabs are going to happen under the new land expropriation policy, all of which are verifiably untrue. However, they have now poked the bear being Donald Trump, who has now posted on his Truth social media that he is going to take away all funding from South Africa, all trade deals, all funding, all aid, to punish us for this land expropriation bill, which has nothing to do with land grabs, just to be clear. Now Afriforum is freaking out because if Trump does that, if he takes away things like AGOA and other things that make our trading with America easier, do you know who suffers? White businesses. They're the ones who suffer, not the kind of ANC politicians that Afriforum was trying to get a dig at. So now Afriforum is coming out and saying they are going to lobby Donald Trump again, this time to say, no, please don't punish the people of South Africa, just the individual politicians. Can you just sanction them? It is so clearly a political play. And of course Trump fell for it. And of course it's backfired for Afriforum. And it's all farcical if it wasn't for the fact that it has real impacts and effects on us ordinary South Africans, who, by the way, are not out.
I think Afriforum is a clear indication that arrogance makes you dumb, because they are going from one news network to the next news network admitting that they are going to approach a foreign power, so another country's government, to target a elected government to influence domestic policy. Question for Afriforum. Give us the definition of treason. Let me show you. Treason under South African law, as defined by the Riotous Assemblies Act 17 of 1956, among other statutes, includes acts like attempting to overthrow the government by force or violence, assisting any enemy of war with the Republic of South Africa, instigating foreign intervention in internal affairs with intentions to harm the state. But the one thing I wanted to highlight, people need to recognize Afriforum represents 315,000 paying members. They do not represent all white South Africans. They do not even represent all white Afrikaans-speaking South Africans. So let's just realize that this is an organization that makes money out of their rhetoric, and they do not represent all white South Africans. However, I do think now is the time for white South Africans who are opposed to what Afriforum is doing to stand up and say something.
It's a hot day in South Africa, and Donald Trump has just come on air to say that he has seen the terrible things going on in South Africa. I live here, and I haven't really seen the terrible things he speaks about. I'm continually amazed at the disinformation that this man sends. I'm amazed that anyone would believe him. We in South Africa are laughing. We honestly are. But what worries me most is that you Americans seem to believe him. Even statements about your own country, you believe that he's doing the best thing. I feel very sad for you and very down. I hope you can get this man out one way or the other.
Speaking of Africa, it's where you were born. You're an African man.
That's correct.
What is your mother tongue? That is from a comment.
My mother tongue is a funny English, a South African English. So it's not your standard American or British or Australian English. It is quite a mixed up English. So we got African words in there. We throw African words in there. Afrikaans words in there. Asian words in there. So that is my mother tongue. I also learned Afrikaans in school. I wasn't very good in Afrikaans at school because we were forced to learn it. And when you're forced to do something, especially in school, you end up despising it. I can understand most of Afrikaans. I can have a very basic conversation, but it is not my first language. My first language is a funny English.
So when you moved to Germany, you were how old?
I was about 4.
Douglas, is there any hope for South Africa? What did you learn while you were there? Are they headed to Zimbabwe 2.0?
Well, it's a fascinating country, of course, and it's an extraordinary country. I've been there before, but not for a few years. And it's a country so rich in resources, and I don't just mean, mineral resources and that sort of thing, but extraordinarily rich in what we rather unpleasantly call in our era human resources. They have an enormous amount of potential in South Africa, and it has been wasted by the government in recent years, which has been so corrupt. I mean, so unbelievably corrupt on a scale which just boggles the mind. It's a sort of corruption of a sort of Middle Eastern level. That's how good the leadership are.
So I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades, which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. It was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto weZizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map, when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. White government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto weSizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987-88, 88-89. The things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority and the history of oppression. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves and make a moral judgment based on our...
So listen to this.
Well, the question was, out of the entire world's population, what percentage is white? There are people who said 60, 80. Somebody even said 90.
What?
Do you know what the real answer is? It's 7%.
Oh yeah, 1 billion.
7%. That means they don't even have the numbers to keep up white supremacy.
This is what you say.
What that means is either we're letting them keep it up or we're actively helping them keep it up because they don't have the manpower to do it by themselves.
No, they don't. Never did.
What if we all collectively said, I don't want to be in a place or support the ideas of white supremacy? It would be over. There's too many of us versus them. It would be over. This is such a game changer for me. This is like the moment where...
Yeah, basically. Wow. But you gotta give it to them, bro. Because they run the world, dog.
7%, you just hit it on the spots.
And they run the world. And they run the world. You gotta give it to them, guys.
Yeah.
Afriforum youth protested outside the Department of Higher Education to draw attention to alleged racial targeting with regards to application made specifically to the veterinary science faculty at the University of Pretoria. Only 22 white matriculants were permitted admission out of the 140 enrolled. This learner achieved 6 distinctions. She was one of the 30 prospective students who had collectively earned 190 distinctions in matric. They were turned away due to their poor academic performance.
The apartheid years are over. We mustn't see any color anymore. I mean, I may have a black face today, but we don't see any color. And the day that they just start admitting children on the basis of their marks and not their race, that would be a wonderful day. And then I would also just like to request that they admit more students into the program.
If you've got the marks and you've worked hard for it, you should be able to get into that category. It shouldn't be designated to certain areas, and the past is the past. And you know what? My daughter wasn't even born in the past. I'm not that old either, but she wasn't born then. So it shouldn't be used, and I think it's very, very unfair that they're not allowing these students in.
Speaking about the dire situation, the national chairman of Afriforum, Charles Oberholzer, said,
And the reason is that we want to show how ridiculous it is to categorize students according to their racial profile, and it's unfair to tell these students that the color of your skin is a passport for an opportunity. So what will happen, unfortunately, the unintended consequence of putting people in categories and selecting students on racial grounds is that these students will leave the country, and in 6 years' time we won't be able to have enough vets. If we want to live in a non-racial society, we shouldn't use racial-based policies to redress the past, and it's not necessary to do it in that way. We are looking for a win-win solution. We are not here to take opportunities away from everyone. We are here to add more opportunities for people that really deserve it.
So a lot of South Africans, especially white South Africans, don't understand this term white privilege. White people, when we hear the word white privilege, we cringe. Why? Because we know that it's true. Not in the sense that you worked hard to achieve much in life to sit in a 2.5 million rand house. We're not talking about that. Self-earned money and things like that are well deserved. We are talking about generational inherited wealth, like you mentioned here, and not just that. We are talking about much more than that. We are talking about the redistribution of wealth to the people of South Africa. That means all the people of South Africa, right? Especially the brown and black people, because they have been mistreated with equity and equality in the past. So it's important we return wealth back to them through redistribution. Giving back the wealth to the people means what? Means giving the resources to the people so that they can use the resources to help benefit all other people. Remember, when we lift people out of poverty, we not only benefit the people going out of poverty, we benefit the whole society. That's what humanity is about. Humanity is about equal rights and sharing this co-experience with fellow humans.
This is my last message addressed to the people of South Africa. I, without qualification, apologize for the pain and the hurt and the indignity and the damage that apartheid has done to black, brown, and Indians in South Africa. I do so not only in my capacity as the former leader of the National Party, but also as an individual. My conversion, to which I refer, didn't end with the admission to myself of the total unacceptability of apartheid. It motivated us in the National Party to take the initiatives we took. From the time that I became leader of the National Party, and more specifically, during my presidency. The road forward is a difficult one. But I firmly believe that if we take hands, and if all the reasonable people in South Africa put their heads together, we can overcome the challenges we face, and we can fulfill the tremendous potential.
If you're an ordinary black or brown South African who grew up in the township, the odds of you ever becoming a millionaire or billionaire are basically zero. And here's the thing, it's not even your fault. How could it be your fault if, previous generations defunded township schools in order to fund suburb schools? How could it be your fault if millions of black and brown South Africans were displaced into dystopian homelands for decades, crammed, overpopulated, left with no health or reproductive info? This is the fruits of the tree that the past government has planted. And now we are sitting here asking who is to blame. I'm not talking about individuality. I'm not talking about people who had the best opportunities to go to the best schools and still didn't make anything of it. I'm talking about people who were systemically placed into crammed areas and their opportunity taken from them to experience the human experience in a better way than they did. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I believe, to the fullest that there are amazing talent, hidden gems, hidden in these townships, just waiting for a chance to shine, and probably will never be given that chance because of past mistakes that still have not been fixed to this day. So I say again, if you're an ordinary black or brown South African, you'll probably never be a millionaire or billionaire unless you'll be that 0.1%. But what's the odds?
Okay, bengisacela ukuthi ningibalansise kahle ngoba niyabona ukuthi ngimlungu ngiyakhanya ngisho. I'm not colored, I'm not mixed race, I'm white. Ek is Afrikaans. Uyazi nihlala ningicela lento ukuthi hey awungizamela umlungu lapho, hey ngifuna ukuthandana nomlungu, awungizamela awungitholele umlungu. Ngathi mine ngiphethe abelungu la ekhukhwini nje la esikhwameni abekho shem abekho nasekhishi lami anginayi-checkers enebelungu phakathi abekho la kumina anginabo belungu wena na usofuna umlungu wakho ngicela uphume nokwakho nesikhathi sakho uhambe uzifunela umlungu wakho niyayizwa ukuthi ngithini hayi aningiyeke mani yo hayi niyicefe ngitholaphi belungu nje ngathi amablome nje umbali nje I can just go and pick them for you hayi mani kancane wena sebenza goba hamba.
So it's that time of the year again where white replacement and white genocide conspiracy theorists get together and talk about the white farm murders in South Africa. What are the white farm murders in South Africa? I'm so glad you asked. So in South Africa, there is this ongoing debate about white farm murders, because despite the fact that farmers of all color are being murdered and robbed on their farms because we live in a country with an incredibly high rate of violent crimes, white farmers seem to be the focus of attention. Why is that? It's suggested that white farmers in South Africa are being targeted with acts of violence as part of a political movement. Whether that happens anecdotally from individuals, I couldn't say. But as far as a collective movement or general occurrence, that is certainly not what is happening, despite what is being suggested by right-wing media. What is the case is that despite the fact white people only make up a measly 8% of the population in South Africa, white people also own proportionately more commercial agricultural properties than indigenous black people in South Africa. And I say proportionately because I'm not suggesting that white people own more commercial agricultural property than black people in general. I am saying that in relation to our population percentage, we do. So here are the facts. The fact is that both white and black South African farmers experience violent crimes as a result of the socioeconomic and generational wealth discrepancies experienced by many South African citizens. Another fact, farms are often remote, which inhibits expedient police responses. They're filled with expensive equipment, and they are worked on by so many people who often get a very good layout of the environment and which access points are easier than others. I have always said that farm murders in this country are a very serious problem and that farmers should be better taken care of by our government. But what I find incredibly sad is how quickly this issue has been co-opted by right-wing conspiracy theorists and American conservatives who just cannot mind their own fucking business. And I've seen so many videos of white Americans talking about how they've paid for white refugees from South Africa to save them from the farm murders, and then later finding out that those people have taken them for a ride, like free vacation, free immigration. Like, you guys are being played so hard and honestly deserved. You don't have to take my word on the fact that there is no white genocide in South Africa. I'm not going to pull a there's no war in Ba Sing Se on you guys. You just need to do the math. It's so simple. White people in this country, we make up 8% of the population. Our government is primarily indigenous black South Africans. Our population is primarily black indigenous South Africans. If any of those demographics wanted us gone, we would be gone overnight. Friend, you wouldn't even hear it. It would just be one night, we're all gone. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not happening. I don't know why this myth has become so tenacious in right-wing media. It for all the focus right-wing media has at the moment, it always comes back to South Africa. Like, we don't want you guys. You know what I mean? And I'll say it one more time, farm murders are a big problem in South Africa. We really should be taking extra steps to look after farmers and farm workers as well, because farm workers are also being targeted. What I'm not going to tell you is that this is all part of some elaborate and convoluted genocide of white South Africans, because that is simply not true. And whenever I say this, I have people in my comments leaving often uncited anecdotes suggesting that some of these attacks are racially motivated. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I would just be very hard-pressed to call that a genocide or a pattern of crimes, because that simply is not the case. So to all the white Americans who are giving free vacations to white South Africans who claim to be farmers escaping the genocide, please keep doing that, because we don't want them either, and you're getting played. So, you know, double points, I guess. But yeah, the fact of the matter is we do live in a country that has an incredibly high crime rate. And like I said earlier, farms are easy targets for crimes. And we should be looking after our farmers and concerned for their safety. But we should, instead of focusing on white farmers, realize that all farmers in South Africa are targets of violent crimes. And the fact that we have proportionately so many more white farmers in South Africa than black farmers is also a point of concern that actually does not lend itself well to this idea that there is a white genocide so much as it does to the concept of racial inequity in South African commercial agriculture. So,
when you're told something repeatedly and then you start believing it without checking if it's actually the truth, and you don't know who told you initially, but people have just repeated it. Mainstream media repeats it, these YouTube bros repeat it, and you just assume it's true. Now, one of those things happens to do with Rob Herself. Okay, when anyone actually introduces Rob Herself, they always refer to him being a billionaire. How do we know he's a billionaire? How do we not know that maybe he screwed up so badly and he's here in South Africa running grifts? Because we all know when someone says someone is a billionaire, then people listen to that person, they have more influence, and they're given many platforms. I mean, this is the first billionaire that I've actually seen on so many YouTube bro channels. It's just wild. And so I asked the question on X yesterday, because what I did is I went to look at Forbes' list of billionaires. And there's no Herself on that list. And there is 2,700 and something billionaires in the world. He doesn't appear. The Herself doesn't appear. So his father doesn't even appear, Nigel Herself. He was involved in the arms deal scandal. And when I put this question out, I had like the strangest responses. People were like really aggressive for me asking, is this man a billionaire? Or did we just keep on hearing he's a billionaire? It is weird, because if you look up Patrice Motsepe, he's on there. I think he's 1,200 and something. If you look up Oppenheimer, he's on there. Visser, he's on there. But Herself is not on there. And then I had people responding to me saying, yes, but of course he's a billionaire because he's building this airport in Cape Town. And then I thought, well, let me just look into that. There is specific mention that he is not involved in that project. So what is this desperate need? Then someone sent me an article that said, look at this. But the article, when you read it, I looked through the article and I'd like, but there's stuff that's not true there. So there's one line, and that's a side issue, that says he spent most of his childhood outside of the country. Rob Herself actually did his military training in South African Defence Force during apartheid. He wasn't outside the country. And then there was, in that same article, reference to him being chairman and CEO of this company and that company. So the UK, because he has a British citizenship and he's listed as British, you've got, it's public record, you can go and check, okay? None of those companies, he was in them previously, but some of the companies that they mentioned, for instance, were dissolved years ago. So I'm just saying, if any of you actually are sure this man is a billionaire and there's information where it's not estimated or anything, let me know, because I like to figure out, did people just tell me this stuff, or is it?
I was just having a look at Donald Trump's statement and saying, just leave a couple of things out of it. South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. A massive human rights violation at a minimum is happening for all to see. And if he was referring to poor black people instead of landed white people, then that would be more true, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be more true that certain classes of people, i.e. poor black people, are being treated very badly in this country and have been for a very, very long time? And it does amount to a human rights violation for poor black people to be so appallingly treated, first by successive forms of apartheid, and then by the ANC government once it lost its way under Jacob Zuma. But that's not what Afriforum cares about. That's not what Donald Trump cares.
Hey, lovely people, and particularly a quick word to my American friends who might be tempted to believe what Donald Trump is saying about South Africa, my home country, where I happen to be right now. Him and Elon Musk are racist twats who have no fucking idea what they're talking about. Because what they're doing is taking the word of a fringe racist group called Afriforum and other disaffected whites, disgruntled by the end of apartheid, feeling hard done by, and much like the Israelis, victimizing themselves when they are not victims at all, bitching about how land redistribution is racist against whites. These are such ignorant provocateurs, and it's going to backfire on them. South Africans' majority, the black majority, and it's a multiracial, multi-tribal society now, only own a tiny proportion of the land versus the size of their population. And while white South Africans make up 7% of the population, more or less, they own about 70% of the decent land. And so the redistribution of land is to address past inequities, and the vast majority of South Africans agree and understand why that's happening and that it's a good thing. It's also under a very strict mechanism. Now, not everyone agrees, of course, with the mechanism, but the principle is what racists like Musk and Trump are railing against here on behalf of a bunch of assholes who equate equality with oppression, because for so many years, decades and decades of the apartheid era, they were the oppressor. And as we know, whenever the oppressor looks at something like equality, it suddenly becomes oppression of him. So fuck Elon Musk, fuck these idiots from Afriforum. You probably know nothing about them, but this is a bunch of, the equivalent of your kind of Proud Boys hanging on to some past that never actually existed. And a past in which the vast majority of people in this country were oppressed, suppressed, and treated much like, fortunately not quite as badly as the Israelis treat the Palestinians. So this whole railing against South Africa, I'm going to add one more point. South Africans, on the whole, all of us, white, black, Indian, colored, which is not a term, is a specific term for those of you who might get offended by that, a specific racial group. We are very, very resilient people. As a country, we have gone through a great deal, both in terms of the early part and then the transition from the apartheid era to genuine multicultural democracy. And whatever Trump throws at us, we can handle. We can handle it because we've been through far, far worse in our history. And my hope is that South Africans all turn around with one voice and tell Trump to fuck off with his sanctions and his fucking withdrawal of aid and his tariffs and all of this stuff, because we can live through it. What I'm not sure about is whether Americans can, because for the most part, all the stuff that Vivek Ramaswamy said recently about Americans being soft, not prepared to put in the hard graft, and all this stuff, I tell you, for the experience of most foreigners is true. And it's not true of every American I know. Some of them are the most hardworking, wonderful people in the world. But as a general principle, South Africans are far more resilient and able to withstand this kind of bullshit authoritarian pressure than any American population. So to my fellow South Africans, let's stick this out. Let's stick up the middle finger to Trump and particularly to Elon Musk, because we know from his background that he left South Africa in the apartheid era and retains the racist bullshit that's motivating these people like Creel. And now that I'm in South Africa, I'm seeing their awesome, ridiculous tweets. Fuck those guys as well. They're the past. Most of us are the